And we are back. Welcome to Magpie's Thoughts, where anything is worth considering. Okay, I'm starting a little later in the day, so hopefully it doesn't get noisy around here. So I'll just talk a little louder. All right. I had a new idea for a new topic. And so we're going to give it a whirl. We're going to just chat about it a little bit. Consider it a teaser. Yes, I like teasers. And so basically, I wanted to ponder a problem in America. And the problem is money. Oh, that's too vague. We can't make that the theme. Money? Well, what do you want? Round money? No money? Tell us. Okay, we're not fighting against capitalism here. We're looking at how our economy functions, and one of the things is about the military. And look, I was in for 8 years. They paid me. Worked out usually pretty well for me. And so I'm not talking about any specific thing about the military, except its very existence is a way to fuel money to people. Hopefully, not just a few rich people, but right, every soldier and sailor, they get paychecks and they help the economy in different places. And so there's a sort of incentive to have a large military is it helps bolster the economy. And we can't say, well, let's not be too cynical. We built our economy around war. The best economies we've ever had are when we've been at war throughout our history, and we have been at war for most of our history. So it's an understandable, safe bet. But the danger is that if we don't go to war, and it's not a war that we're invested in, the economy can kind of falter a little bit. And so the question is, how do we find a safeguard for this? Is this just the nature of it, that we just have to be in a perpetual state of war? Well, that's not a great idea. So I want to talk about, we're going to talk very simply about a basic idea. Because, again, this is just a teaser. But I want to at least expound it, right? Anything's worth considering here, right? Okay, well, here's the problem. If we were to look at a local economy, I know there's background noise, I promise, I'm going to get to some point eventually. Let's say we have a local economy, and we're in a factory town. So the biggest employer is a single factory. It employs over 50% of people. And then there's another 10 or more percent that are actually contracted to work some way in regards to the factory. Maybe they fill gaps at the factory. Maybe the janitorial staff isn't actually employees. Maybe they're doing a renovation and the factory is so big that something's always being renovated. And so some other local group is doing that. Okay? Fine. Maybe the things they make, the actual shipping company is separate. And so there are these ancillary jobs that definitely only exist because the factory is there, but don't actually work for the factory. And so that's maybe 10, 15%. And we're already over half, right? It's anything from 51% over half to like 80% over half, right? And so I'm not talking about, every single person in the town works at this one place. But here's the thing. What about the next level jobs? Let's say on the way to the factory, there's a lonely road for just, a few miles. And on that road, there's a gas station convenience store. The only people who are going to be stopping there is people going to the factory. And great. So everybody who works there is keeping their jobs because of the factory. So if the factory closes, immediately all of those contractor jobs, they ancillary, right? They have different companies, but they're gone too. Maybe they're the local supplier of something. They're going to get wiped out, right? They're not going to keep their jobs because their biggest customer, or maybe the place that they work, the renovation jobs, it's all dried up. So they're out too. Then it trickles off, right? That gas station, that's just going to be closed. Nobody's going down the road anymore. They're gone. And so then you think, well, yeah, but the town had a few grocery stores. Those people keep their jobs. Not once nobody can afford groceries. Some people are going to leave, right? Some people, if they can't get another job here, everything's going to start drying up. And it'll start with the main services. Suddenly, that restaurant that it could easily survive on just, it's a nice restaurant. It's not the nicest restaurant in town, but it is cloth napkin. Suddenly, not enough people are showing up every day. And maybe it'll be able to hang on to the holiday season when maybe more people show up, but that's months away, and it just collapses in on itself. And suddenly there are even fewer people who are working, and it just goes business after business. Each one that goes hits the next business over because that's even fewer, and there are 3 businesses on a block, and suddenly with 2 of them out, nobody's stopping at the 3rd one. And it just ripples through and destroys everything. Now, what if instead of us talking about a factory, we're talking about a military base, right? I'm talking about BRAC here. So this is base relocation and closure. So when a BRAC commission happens, now I'm making noise. When a BRAC commission happens, it can collapse a base pretty fast. And then it's like, well, what goes in its place? It's like, well, poverty. Poverty goes in its place. Sure, the soldiers move on, but those soldiers that paid local taxes, right, they don't put that money back in. And those people who were buying things at local stores aren't anymore. And so suddenly these businesses that did a lot of businesses, maybe they were repairmen who were not military, but they worked on the base in any capacity. Suddenly they don't have jobs. And with so much of the city traffic that was going to there, suddenly without that traffic, we don't need as many people doing road work, and on and on. And I'm not saying it collapses a whole community, but it sure as heck can. And so the problem becomes, well, let's look at a place that has no base. Well, then it's not going to have that impact, but it's also not going to have the benefit of the federal money pouring in, because we also give federal dollars through students whose parents are in the military, right? This trickles into the local school system. And so the problem is this. We put a lot of money back into small towns, big towns, cities that have bases. But it's not evenly distributed. Not that we think it should be. Okay, I'm not trying to at all claim that we should have bases evenly distributed by population. That's a wild claim. I'm just saying by the nature of what it is, it can't be. Bigger bases are better, right? They're more efficient. You can save money, and if I work at a base, I can have more leadership at my base already. It has more accommodation for people who want to learn other skill sets, right? I have all of this in-house. I don't have to fly people to somewhere else. And so there's a lot of value to bigger bases versus a bunch of small random bases. And this is also kind of the trend that we're seeing with bases across multiple branches. And joint bases they're not even a new idea, right? We have lots of them. So closing a base is bad, but yet keeping them open is a little unfair to places without bases. Well, what do you want? Okay, here's what I want. I want our economy to be based on something that will distribute money across everywhere. And so in this new little podcast series, although I'm going to be numbering them and connecting them to Magpie's Nest because these are all crazy ideas, what if we started giving the kind of money that we give to the military to education? Okay, so first caveat, we're not getting rid of the military. We're not even imagining doubling the budget and giving all of that to education. But we're imagining a world in which we're giving a crazy amount of money to education. And we're doing it on the federal level, federal dollars. And what does that mean? Education's a tricky topic by itself. Because are we saying that we're just going to drop $500 million into school renovations across America? Okay, well, that's sure. But there's also teacher salaries. Are we going to start paying teacher salaries? Because that's the equivalent. Maybe. Not going to cover all of this in this video. Remember, teaser. What about... But education isn't just high school. If you're going to do education, you have to start talking about more college scholarships, making colleges cheaper. Maybe the budget difference has to be covered by Congress. Okay, but what else? Well, there's things like NASA, which has, and then you have NOAA. So these are oceanographic and atmospheric kind of groups. So these are different types of scientific research. Then you have the USGS, which is geology, right? And suddenly you're starting to notice the trend that we're talking about different science industries. And it's like, well, why does that matter? Why do these different science organizations matter in the grand scheme? Well, if we're trying to have the best education in the world, and we're dumping money into it, then we're also dumping money into the real scientists. So we're going to make it cheaper to become a teacher. We're going to make it cheaper to become a scientist. What about the arts? Well, that's part of school too, isn't it? So we're going to dump way more money into the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, and we're going to just see where it all goes, right? What would happen to our economy? What would happen to our world if we dumped way more money into these things? And you say, well, what about like the natural sciences? What about biology? What about medical? Well, CDC and NIH are going to get huge amounts of money. And does that mean that, what does that mean? What's the implication? And what is my definition of huge? These are great questions. Are we talking trillions, billions, millions, hundreds of thousands? Well, we can talk about how much money the annual budget is for some of these places, and how the definition of a lot of money for the DoD budget isn't quite the same thing for a lot of money according to the National Endowment for the Arts. Their definitions are different. But if I go on much longer, I'm going to have to actually talk about these things instead of just teasing you. So, this is your teaser, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we ponder these things together in future videos. Until next time.